Chernobyl. This place isn't just lost in the pages of history, it has become the embodiment of mysteries and nightmares. Once a peaceful town in Ukraine, Chernobyl turned into a grim ghost, engulfed in thousands of secrets and rumors. We know what happened, but the real details remain hidden. Each year, new sinister stories and horrifying tales emerge, making them hard to believe. However, none of us can know for sure what lies behind the veil of darkness in the dead city of Pripyat. Anastasia Vasilyevna, I understand that it's hard to recall, but I need to know. What happened to you 25 years ago when you got lost in Pripyat? Even thinking about it is terrifying. If I tell you, it will be hard to believe. What I experienced back then was possibly the most horrifying event of my life. But if you want to hear the ramblings of a crazy woman, then listen. It's a long and eerie story. When we were 12, my parents and I went on a tour of Chernobyl. My dad finally took a vacation and we decided to relax. Mom suggested we go to Chernobyl as the perfect place to escape the hustle and bustle of the city. Who would have thought that this silence would turn out to be so sinister? We were walking down one of the streets, listening to the guide who was talking about Pripyat. As I looked around, I saw massive structures engulfed in moss. Trees in the courtyards had grown to enormous sizes, and the grass almost completely covered the first floors of the buildings. Rusty carousels and broken sandboxes added a strange charm to the place. Soon, the guide stopped and pointed to one of the buildings. He said that a scientist who was in the disaster zone that fateful night lived there. At that moment, I noticed a strange glow coming from the basement. It was so bright that it caught my attention even though no one else seemed to notice. Curiosity got the better of me and I ran to check out what the light was. In the basement, I saw a glowing orb that then descended. I followed it into the dark and creepy basement. The orb, though small, lit my path. At 12 years old, it felt like I had entered a magical world. But that was just the beginning. Doesn't this glowing orb seem strange to you? It turned out it wasn't just an orb. Suddenly, it stopped and flashed brightly. I closed my eyes and when I opened them, there was a ginger kitten standing in front of me, emitting the same light but weaker. It looked at me and ran forward. I followed it and stepped out onto a street that looked completely different. The city was clean, bright, and alive as it probably was before. But there wasn't a soul around. I was confused and panicked. Where were my parents? Fear gripped me and I started to cry. But the kitten came up to me and began rubbing against me, calming me down. I picked it up and started walking down the empty streets, calling for my parents. But there was no answer, no response. I entered one of the apartments looking for food, but found only empty rooms. The kitten started scratching at the cabinet door, and inside I found empty cans and a matchbox. When night fell, I lit matches just to see something. In one of the apartments, I found a knife, but the match went out, leaving me in complete darkness. I heard a rustling sound and felt the kitten press against me and start hissing. From the doorway, a huge black silhouette with bright red eyes appeared. I froze in terror, my heart pounding in my chest. The silhouette began moving toward me. In a panic, I grabbed the knife and threw it at the creature. It lodged in its neck and the creature collapsed to the floor, bleeding. I sat on the floor, shocked, in total darkness, too scared to move. Hunger became unbearable and I realized I could die if I didn't eat. Suddenly, the kitten glowed again and approached the dead creature. It was something like a monkey with a stretched-out body. I understood that this was my only chance to survive, so I took the knife to carve up the body. Wait, you just killed it and ate it? So easily? Not as easily as you think. Carving up a corpse and eating raw meat in pitch darkness was horrifying. I didn't know whether I felt more fear or hunger. But thanks to this, I postponed my death. After eating, I vomited, but I managed to pull through. The night was sleepless, and I huddled in a corner of another room. The kitten led me to the light again. We went outside, but suddenly I saw many creatures with red eyes. I was surrounded. When one of them noticed me, I ran back into the building and up to the top floor. Once on the roof, I realized there was nowhere to run. The only thing I could do was close the hatch and hope for salvation. I rushed to the hatch and, with horror, saw one of the monsters already reaching its repulsive hands up. My hands were shaking, but I pushed the hatch cover with all my might. The heavy metal plate went down with a dull thud, crashing into the monster that had almost completely climbed onto the roof. The loud crash shattered the silence and bloody shreds scattered everywhere. My fear was so intense that my thoughts and emotions merged into a single mass of panic. I collapsed to the ground, unable to move. My strength abandoned me and I fell into a dark, insane sleep. When I woke up, I was no longer under the open sky. The room was dark and sinister. I stood up and noticed that the walls were only visible thanks to the dim light coming from that same kitten. It had appeared again, illuminating the space around me. I saw several dining utensils scattered on the floor and remnants of food. The monsters had evidently dined here recently, leaving only chaos behind. Fear knotted in my chest, but the kitten, as before, helped me focus. I, as quietly as possible, moved towards the exit. But just as I reached the doorway, one of the creatures grabbed me by the leg. I screamed in terror and started kicking the creature with my other leg, but it grabbed that leg too, pulling me to the ground. My mind was engulfed in darkness. The fear was so great that I could barely perceive reality. The monster approached my face, and an indescribable horror rang in my head. At the last moment, I felt something hard under my hand and, turning my head, saw a knife. My hands instinctively reached for the knife, and I plunged it into the creature's throat. It screamed, clutching its neck, and fell to the side. I jumped up and saw it writhing in agony as a second creature woke up and started towards me. In a panic, I slid to the floor, feeling for something among the debris. Grabbing a fork, I stood up and drove it straight into the monster's eye. The creature howled in pain, and the sound was so piercing that my head almost exploded from the strain. Suddenly, I snapped back to reality, and the doctor's voice pulled me from the darkness. "Head. Oh God. Doctor, quickly." Doctors burst into the room, and their urgency made me feel the world around me dissolve into darkness. They asked the man to leave, and he stepped towards the window, where another person joined him. "So, did you believe her?" "She's crazy." "I don't know." She spoke seriously. I saw fear in her eyes. It didn't seem like she was lying. "Max, she killed and ate several people, including her parents. The people who were with her on the tour are still in shock. The way she acted when they tried to stop her, this isn't just a child's fear. You can't chalk it up to a child's mind. Will she spend the rest of her life in a hospital bed? Where else can we put her? She ate her parents in Pripyat. Even if we let her out, there's no place for her in this world. It's better for her to stay here. Goodbye." The man looked out the window, where the woman had calmed down and fallen asleep again. He closed his eyes, placed his hand on the glass, and whispered, "Forgive me. I just wanted to make a friend." A bright light illuminated the space, and the man disappeared. In his place was a glowing orb, which slowly faded and dissolved into the air.